And we're going to finish the 25th chapter of A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court, which is called The Competitive Examination. I'm going to go back to the beginning of the chapter that I was almost finished with when the video cut out. This is the private audience between the boss and the king as to how to organize the king's army. I had a private audience with the king and made a proposition. I said it was quite right to offer that regiment officer that regiment with nobilities, and he couldn't have done a wiser thing. It would also be a good idea to add 500 officers to it. In fact, add as many officers as there were nobles and relatives of nobles in the country, even if there should finally be 5 times as many officers as privates in it, and thus make it the crack regiment, the envied regiment, the king's own regiment, and entitled to fight on its own hook, and in its own way, and go whither it would, and come when it pleased, in time of war, and be utterly swell and independent. This would make that regiment the heart's desire of all the nobility, and they would all be satisfied and happy. Then we would make up the rest of the standing army out of commonplace materials, and officer it with nobodies, as was proper, nobodies selected on a basis of mere efficiency. And we would make this regiment toe the line, allow it no aristocratic freedom from restraint, and force it to do all the work and persistent hammering to the end that whenever the king's own was tired and wanted to go off for a change and rummage around amongst ogres and have a good time, it could go without uneasiness, knowing that matters were set in safe hands behind it, and business going to be continued at the old stand same as usual. The king was charmed with the idea. When I noticed that, it gave me a valuable notion. I thought I saw my way out of an old and stubborn difficulty at last. You see, the royalties of the Pendragon stock were a long-lived race and very fruitful. Whenever a child was born to any of these, and it was pretty often, there was wild joy in the nation's mouth, and piteous sorrow in the nation's heart. The joy was questionable, but the grief was honest, because the event meant another call for a royal grant. Long was the list of these royalties, and they were a heavy and steadily increasing burden upon the treasury, and a menace to the crown. Yet Arthur could not believe this latter fact, and he would not listen to any of my various projects for substituting something in the place of the royal grants. If I could have persuaded him to now and then provide a support for one of these outlaying scions from his own pocket, I could have made a grant to do over it, and would have had a good effect with the nation. But no, he wouldn't hear of such a thing. He had something like a religious passion for royal grant. He seemed to look upon it as a sort of sacred swag, and one could not irritate him in any way so quickly and so surely as by an attack upon that venerable institution. If I ventured to cautiously hint that there was not another respectable family in England that would humble itself to hold out the hat, however, that is as far as I ever got, he always cut me short there, and peremptorily too. But I believed I saw my chance at last. I would form this crack regiment out of officers, alone, not a single private. Half of it should consist of nobles, who should fill all the places up to Major General and serve gratis and pay their own expenses, and they would be glad to do this when they should learn that the rest of the regiment would consist exclusively of princes of the blood. These princes of the blood should range in rank from lieutenant general up to field marshal, and be gorgeously salaried and equipped and fed by the state. Moreover, and this was the master stroke, it should be decreed that these princely grandees should be always addressed by a stunningly gaudy and awe-compelling title, which I would presently invent. And they only, in all England, should be so addressed. Finally, all princes of the blood should have free choice, join that regiment, get that grant title, and renounce the royal grant, or stay out and receive a grant. Neatest touch of all, unborn but eminent princes of the blood could be born into the regiment, and start fair, with good wages and a permanent situation, upon due notice from the parents. All the boys would join, I was sure of that, so all existing grants would be relinquished. That the newly born would always join was equally certain. Within 60 days, that quaint and bizarre anomaly, the Royal Grant, would cease to be a living fact and take its place among the curiosities of the past. And that is the end of chapter 25.